Hello and welcome to the Beach House 34 podcast. I'm your host, Christine Worth. To all the new subscribers, thank you so much for being a part of this journey. And a huge thank you to all of our loyal listeners. You make this podcast possible. We are continuing with the trial coverage of the Darlie Routier case. And in our last episode, we heard testimony from Sherry Moses and Pastor David Rogers. Now, Sherry Moses was Darlie's aunt, or is Darlie's aunt, talked about Darlie's visit to Pennsylvania in March of 1995 with Devin and Damon, and described Darlie as being a very loving and patient mother. She also recalled her own visit when she came down for Thanksgiving in November of 1995. She came down to Dallas, and she was asked if Darlie at that time appeared sad or depressed, and she said no, it was quite the opposite. In June of 1996, there was actually a family reunion in Pennsylvania that was supposed to happen, and this was supposed to occur just a few days after the crime. Darlie had already purchased plane tickets for that trip, but after what happened, these tickets were then transferred to her family members so that they could fly down to Texas. The second witness for the defense was Pastor David Rogers. He was the one who officiated at the boys' funeral. He testified about how Darlie was genuinely grief-struck and heartbroken. He described the support from the family and friends during this incredibly devastating time and his numerous visits to Darlie while she was in jail. The pastor also defended a lot of Darlie's actions and the way that she acted, arguing that her displays of grief were entirely appropriate. He was almost harassed to an extent to reveal to the prosecution the conversations that he had had with Darlie while Darlie was in jail, but he refused to give them that information. He was also asked if he felt like the pocket knives that were put into the casket for the boys was appropriate, and mentioned that it was not his place to say. Whatever the family felt was appropriate, that was the right thing to do. We then heard a brief mention of tarot cards also being placed in their casket, and this is the first I've heard of this, so maybe we'll hear more about it. I don't know. The pastor said he knew nothing of this, and it's kind of hard to tell if this was an actual fact or if the prosecution was just throwing something out there that would shock the jurors. I honestly don't know. Today, we're going to hear from three of Darlie's friends, Dana Godfrey, Cara Byford, and Julie Clark. Now, if you're interested, you can hear the entire Darlie Routier story that was covered in episode number 33. From there, you can then listen to the trial coverage from the beginning, which started with Darlie's bond hearings, and the entire trial is in its own playlist on YouTube. And I'll have all of these links available for you in the show notes. And finally, to keep up to date on the most recent happenings regarding Darlie and either what's currently happening in her case or the things that have happened in the past, I encourage you to visit her sister's TikTok, her sister Danelle. It's incredibly informative, and I'll also have that link for you below as well. Finally, before we get started, I would appreciate it so much if you're listening or watching this on YouTube to give it a thumbs up or subscribe to the channel and stay up to date on all of the new episodes, regardless of where you are listening. Thank you all so much for the messages, the comments, and the support. You are all so appreciated. With all of that said, let's get to the next witness for the defense, Dana Godfrey. And the direct examination is begun by defense attorney Mr. Curtis Glover. Dana, tell the jury what you do. I'm a housewife, and I also work with my husband part-time now in electronics. Okay. And that is in where? In our home. Okay. Dallas or Rowlett or where? In Rowlett. In Rowlett. Tell the jury how you know Darlie Routier. I met Darlie the first day she moved into her home on Bond Street. I brought her cookies over to her house. Okay. How many years ago has that been? Say approximately 8 years. Okay. Devin was just born. Okay. She had a baby then, Devin, is that right? Yes, she did. Okay. Did you all become pals? Very close, very soon. Okay. What did you all do together? Everything. We shopped, just walking the babies. We have just been longtime close friends together, just camping, everything that friends do together. What kind of person was Darlie Lynn? She was a sweet, caring, loving person from the first day I met her. Okay. She is a good friend of yours? Very good. Is she still a good friend of yours? She is a good friend. Yes. Okay. As the years have gone by, have you all remained as close as you were back, say, 8 years ago? No, we didn't. Okay. How did y'all drift apart, if you did? We drifted apart as soon as I started coaching softball and getting in the PTA and going back to college. Okay. They moved, and like I said, I started coaching, and my life was coaching after that. But did you stay in touch? Yes, quite frequently we did. Have you found, since you have indicated to the jury you all drifted apart, that there was any change in the Darlie that you had always known? Never. What kind of person was she? She was good. She was a good mother, caring. Darlie was always there if you needed her to talk to. She was just a sweet, good person. Always. Okay. When, if you know, do you think the last time you would have talked to her prior to these little boys tragically dying? I'm sorry, can you repeat that? When would have been the last time, if you know, that you spoke with her prior to this event in June of 96 when the little boys were? I would say about 2 months prior to that, we had spoken. I went to visit her at her office. I just happened to go up there to see how she was doing. Okay. And how was she doing? She was doing great. The boys were running around. She was feeding the baby. Had you seen the baby? Yes, I had. I said, had you seen it prior to that time? Yes, I had. Okay. So you were familiar with Drake? Yes, I was. How was he doing? He was doing just fine. Okay. Just fine. Everybody seemed happy. Everybody did. The boys were running around, drives them crazy. And she was trying to calm them down. And I was talking to Darren and her and just a normal atmosphere. Okay. When did you get any hint about what ultimately happened there in June? I got a phone call early that morning from a neighbor, Celia Morgan, and she called me and said that Mr. Greg Davis says, I'm going to object. That is hearsay. I'll object to it. The court says, sustained. Mr. Glover then continues. You found out what happened, did you not? Yes, I did. What did you do? The court says, just a moment, Mr. Glover. Ma'am, don't tell him what people told you. Wait until you hear the lawyer's next question, okay? The witness says, I'm sorry. The court says, that is quite all right. Go ahead. Mr. Glover then continues. What did you do, Dana, as a result of what you found out? Well, I believe I dropped the phone down and then ran upstairs hysterically to my husband, who was in the shower, and screamed that the boys were dead and that they were. And he came out of the shower. And of course, my children ran down the hallway and heard me, unfortunately. And I got them out of the room and he tried to calm me down and we got dressed and we went right to the hospital. Okay. What did you see when you got to the hospital? Well, first we had to wait down for a while until the police let us up. And when we got up there, I'm sorry, when we got upstairs and they wouldn't let us in, we saw Darren and they said we had to wait a while to see Darlie. And I just wanted to see her. Okay. How was Darren? Darren was, I'd say he was still in shock. He was so out of it and pacing, and I just remember him tapping his hands on the side of the bar, talking to me and my husband and trying to tell us, what had happened. And we waited until they let us go in, and then I went in. What time was that? I'd say it was anywhere between 9 and 9:30 that morning. Okay. And when you got into the room, what did you see? I saw Darlie holding her boy's pictures in her arms. How was that? Describe that for the jury. It was, she was just crying and holding their pictures in her arms and rocking back and forth, just kind of out of it, just in shock and just crying. Okay. You have known this woman for 8 years? Mm-hmm. Y'all had a close relationship? Yes, sir. Okay. You knew her emotionally? Yes, I did. Okay. Describe her emotion. Her emotion was, I would say from the looks of her, she was on heavy medication, tearful. She couldn't speak very well. She was listless. I fed her some ice and we talked a little bit. Well, I finally pulled the pictures out of her hand. I told her, I said, Darlie, just put the pictures down, babe. Just get some rest. And then she tried to tell me what happened. Mr. Greg Davis says, I'm going to object to that as being hearsay. What was said? The court said, sustain the objection. Let's rephrase our question. Mr. Glover then continues. Now, this would have been around 9 or 9:30 that you were in there? Yes, sir. You made some statement when we talked last night about the fact that she was not cleaned properly. Explain that to the jury. I remember I was just staring at her hands also. When I took the pictures out, I saw the blood between her fingers, dried blood, and then on her fingernails, there was dried blood, and even on her arms. On her arm, there was blood on her arm. And it just looked like, and then to see her neck, it just looked like they just didn't clean her up very well. Okay. Dana, did you have an occasion to go to the viewing of the boys? Yes, I did. Okay. Did you have occasion to see Darlie then? Yes, I did. She came in late. Where did you see her? I don't remember. What kind of shape was she in? Out of it, just not with it. Okay. Did that seem genuine to you, or did it seem like she was faking that? There was no faking, none. I just saw a mother that had been through a very, very bad tragedy, and I didn't see any faking. I saw the real Darlie, and she was heartbroken. All right. Mr. Glover says, pass the witness. And the court says, all right, Mr. Davis. And the cross examination is being done by Mr. Greg Davis. Mrs. Godfrey, my name is Greg Davis. I just have a few questions for you, just so I'm clear. Were you in the house there at 5801 Eagle Drive the evening of June the 5th, 1996? No, sir, I was not. Were you in that house during the early morning hours of June the 6th of 1996? No, I was not. When you saw that the defendant had not been cleaned properly, which nurse did you go to report that? There was a nurse. I didn't report that she wasn't cleaned properly. I reported to the nurse to please give her something that would calm her down. And then the nurse did get up and came over and spoke to me and said that she had been like this for a while. And okay, well, and proceeded to give her medication. Well, I'm sorry. My question was, which nurse did you report that to? The one that was in the room at the time, sitting up on the side. You reported the fact that she had not been cleaned properly to that nurse? No, I did not report that she had not been cleaned. Thank you. Thank you. When you saw her 2 months prior to this incident, you said that she appeared to be doing great. Is that right? Yes. Would you agree with me that if an individual attempted to take her life, that she is not doing? Mr. Hagler then says, excuse me, Your Honor, excuse me. There has been no showing. That is not in evidence, Your Honor. Mr. Davis says, Barbara Javel, the court says, I'll let her answer it. Ask that question, and if she knows the answer, I'll let her answer it. Mr. Davis then continues. Let me ask you again. If the defendant during that time period that you say she is doing great had started to take her life, but was interrupted by her husband before she completed the act, would you consider that to be doing great? I don't believe she would do that. That wasn't my question. I know that you may not believe that, but my question is, if that occurred, would you consider the defendant to be doing great during that time period, Mrs. Godfrey? No, not with any person. Mr. Davis says, no further questions. Mr. Glover says, that's all we have. And the court says, you may step down, ma'am. Watch your step. Please do not discuss your testimony with anybody who testifies. Thank you. All right. Your next witness. And the next witness is the testimony of Cara Byford. And the direct examination is done by one of the defense attorneys, Mr. Preston Douglas. Do you go by a nickname? Yes. What is that? Jeannie. Jean or Jeannie? Jeannie. Okay. Where do you live? In Plano. How long have you lived in Plano? About 4 years. How old are you? 27. Are you married? Yes. Do you have children? Yes. How many children do you have? I have one. What is your child's name? Kaylee. How old is your child? 3. What do you do for a living? I am an administrator. And what company do you work at? Erickson. Okay. And have you met Darlie Routier? Yes. And can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how you met Darlie? I met her through her mother, Darlie Key, when we were going to school together in '89. Okay. Now, Darlie Key works for the same employer that you do. Is that right? Yes. All right. And how was it that if you met the mother, how did you come to meet the daughter? Just studying together at her home. At whose home? Darlie Key's. And then during visits, Darlie Routier would come by? Yes. And did you get to know Darlie? Did you come to know her? Yes. Now, I'm talking about Darlie Routier? Yes. Can you describe, well, first, what year would that be when you first met Darlie Routier? In 1989. And since 1989, have you had occasion to see Darlie Routier frequently during that time? Yes. Have you socialized with Darlie? Yes. Have you been on a trip with Darlie? Yes. Do you believe that you can characterize yourself as a good friend? Yeah. All right. If you would please, describe for the jury your impression of Darlie Routier. How would you describe her to the jury? Kind-hearted. One of the nicest people I have met. She would do pretty much anything for you. Is she a generous person? Yes. Was she generous to you? As a friend. Was she a happy person? Yes. Did she seem to be upbeat a majority of the time that you were around her? Yes. Now, I want to ask you a little bit about grief. And for background, you have had a child that died? Yes. How old was your child? Was it a boy? It was a boy, yes. How old was your boy when he died? He was 4 months old. And he aspirated. Is that right? Yes. And Darlie, of course, knew that. Yes. And after her boys were killed, did she seek you out for help? Yes. Why did she seek you out for help? She thought I would understand, and that I could give her support because I had lost my child. I have not been in that situation, thankfully, but I want to ask you a question. Does the process of grieving, when you have lost a child, as you have, do you think there is any way that a person can have the right to say how someone ought to grieve when they have lost a child? No. Do you think that anybody has a right to judge that? No. I want to ask you if you can describe for the jury, or let me start back. Do you believe that you saw Darlie Routier exhibit any inappropriate actions or behavior after her children were killed? No. Can you describe what you saw when you observed Darlie? She was very hurt, painful. She missed her boys. Did she show outwardly signs of emotion? Yes. What kind? She cried. Now, were these fake tears? No. Did she have some time that she was just quiet? Yes. Did you see her at times where she would hold pictures of the boys in her arms? Yes. And did she look at that picture? Yes. And did you see times when she would smile? Yes. Now, did that seem inappropriate to you? No. Did you visit with her at the hospital? Yes. Do you recall what day it was you visited her? I visited her on the 6th and on the 7th. On either the 6th or the 7th, while she was still in the hospital, did you have an opportunity to look at her right arm? Yes. Did you see any bruising on her right arm? Yes. Now, is there any question in your mind about that? No. Did the bruising seem to be a slight bruise or a significant bruise? Significant. How did it affect you? I got real upset and had to walk out of the room. Because of the bruise? Yes. Now, I got a suspicion that you are going to be asked if you ever ran to a nurse. Mr. Greg Davis says, I'm going to object to that as being leading here. The court says, sustained. I'll sustain the objection. Mr. Douglas then continues. Did you ever feel the need? Let me ask you this. Did you think those bruises were obvious? Yes, sir. Did you ever feel like you had the need to go tell a nurse that she was bruised when she is in a hospital? No. Now, after Darlie was discharged from the hospital, did you have an occasion to go to what has been called, well, did you go to the funeral? Yes. Did you go to the viewing? Yes. And throughout that time, did Darlie Routier appear to exhibit what you thought was appropriate displays of grief? Yes. Did she talk to you about it? Yes. Did she express to you dismay? Yes. Did she express to you that she felt helpless? Yes. How did that go? I think she didn't know what to do. I know she felt alone, although she wasn't going through this alone. I think that is the way anybody would feel. And over a period of time, have you continued to talk to her on the phone and try to help her? Yes. And throughout all of this, have you observed a great deal of support for Darlie through her family? Yes. Did you go to what has been called the prayer service at the gravesite on Devon's birthday? Yes. Were you aware that certain items were being placed graveside as mementos or memorializing or placed at the grave for the children? Yes. Did you do that? Yes. Mr. Douglas says, may I approach the witness, Your Honor? And the court says, you may. Mr. Douglas then says, Miss Byford, I want to hand you what I have marked as Defendant's Exhibit number 71 and ask you if you can identify that exhibit. Yes, the poem I gave to Darlie. You gave that to Darlie? Yes. Okay, now I have folded the paper. Is the poem that's on the underside, was that given to Darlie also? Yes. So both of them were? Yes. And does that correctly reflect the poem that you gave Darlie before the memorial service? Yes. Mr. Douglas says, I'll offer Defendant's Exhibit number 71. And Mr. Greg Davis says, object to it as it's irrelevant as to what this witness gave to the defendant. It's hearsay also. The court says, well, Mr. Davis says, what relevance is a poem given by this witness to the defendant? Mr. Mulder says, Judge, it's every bit as relevant as the knife. The court says, gentlemen, please, just a minute. If you have an objection, Mr. Douglas is handling this part of the examination for the defense. All the other attorneys will kindly remain silent over there. Let me have this. Let me see that. Mr. Mosty says, Your Honor, may I respond? Can we confer with Mr. Douglas? Is that okay with the court? The court says, I don't think that is necessary. Thank you. Mr. Mosty says, we can't? The court says, objection overruled. I'll admit it. Go ahead. Mr. Douglas then says, why did you give this poem to Darlie Routier? It was given to me after my son died. Even though it's sad, I found it comforting. Did you give it to Darlie to help comfort her? Yes. Would you read that poem for us, please? Yes. And she goes on, quote, Oh, Lord, I cried. My heart will break. Nothing can ever stop the ache. Oh, Lord, our loved one is gone. Gone, God said. No, your loved one is not gone, because as long as you have memories in your heart, they live on. My child, don't you know I care? I won't give you more than you can bear. Life and death are my choice. Trust my wisdom and rejoice. Wipe away the tear from your eye, for there is no longer a need to cry. My son died so your loved one could have eternal life. Now they are with me in paradise. I am the king. For each life I have a plan. I hold your future in the palm of my hand. I am the good shepherd, and I know my own. You are never forsaken or left alone. I know you loved them, but I loved them more. I held their hand and gently led them through the door. They are more alive now than they were before. They are happier now than they have ever been in this perfect world without hurt or sin. Asleep? No. We walked together today, and they watched you as you knelt to pray. They smiled and said, they miss me, you know. Do they understand why I had to go? I love them, and I know they love me. Tell them I'm happy. Tell them I'm free. Loved one, it is wonderful here. Don't weep for me. We will soon be together again for eternity. Now, along with bracelets and cards and things, there were poems like what you just read to the jury and placed at the graveside? Yes. Thank you. Mr. Douglas then says, pass the witness. Mr. Greg Davis begins his cross-examination. Miss Byford, how long have you been good friends with the defendant's mother, Darlie Key? Since '89. You all were both co-workers and then obviously good enough friends that you went over and visited at her house several times? Yes. Okay. And you've talked with her since you have been down here in Kerrville, I take it? Yes. You have described the defendant as being kind-hearted, upbeat. Would you agree with me that even kind-hearted people can have problems that may seem overwhelming in their life? Yes. Would you agree with me also that even kind-hearted people may reach a point in their life where they cannot seem to cope with those problems? No. You don't believe that is possible? Well, not in this case. The bruises that you saw on the defendant's right arm? Yes. Okay. Describe those bruises for me. Very dark purple, covered a large part of her arm. Okay, so very dark purple. And if you can let me, and Mr. Davis says, Judge, if I may approach the witness, Your Honor, and the court says you may. Mr. Davis then continues. And Miss Byford, if you will just indicate on my arm where you saw the bruising to the defendant that you saw at the hospital. Was it outside, inside, up, down? What part of the arm was the bruising? Right through here. Okay. You are indicating to the inside. The inside. Okay. How long? Well, what's the length? About to here? Okay. You have indicated above my elbow. Okay. How far down did it extend? About right to here. Right above the wrist, all the way up to the elbow, right? Yes, from what I remember. Okay. Mr. Douglas then says, Your Honor, that is a misstatement. He said above the elbow. Mr. Davis says, that is where she indicated. And the court says, well, let the record reflect that she indicated approximately 1 inch above the left elbow to about 1 inch above, right elbow to the right wrist. Mr. Greg Davis then continues. And when was it that you first saw this bruise on her right arm, Miss Byford? The 7th. What time on the 7th? I don't know what time. I went to the hospital. I know it was after she was transferred into the private room. Okay. Morning, noon, afternoon, evening. I believe it was in the afternoon. About what time in the afternoon? Maybe 2 or 3 o'clock. Okay. How long did you stay at the hospital at that time? Not very long, about an hour. What was the appearance of her left arm? I don't remember. You don't remember? No. What about her right hand? I don't remember the right hand. How about the left hand? No. And Mr. Douglas has been kind enough to indicate that I'm not going to ask you about going and asking the nurses about any of this. But surely, when you saw the bruising, you asked the defendant how she got that bad bruise on her right arm, didn't you? No, you didn't? I just assumed. Assumed what? That she got it from the stab or from a struggle. I didn't want to ask her details. And she didn't volunteer as to how she got that bruise? No. Well, when you went up to talk with her when she was in the hospital, didn't she tell you what had happened to her there in the house? Yes. Okay. What did she say to you? She said, what version did she give you? She just told me that someone had come into the house and killed her boys and attacked her. Okay. And you just gave that in the order that the man killed her boys and then attacked her? Is that the way she told you? Yes. No more detail than that? No. All right. Let me just move forward just a bit here. Since the defendant has been out of the hospital, you have continued to talk with her. Is that right? Yes. Counsel with her about what's happened? Is that right? Yes. And surely in those conversations, she has gone over this incident in greater detail with you, hasn't she? No. So in all of the conversations, about how many conversations have you had with her since she was discharged from the hospital? Well, maybe 15. So in none of those 15 conversations that you have had with her, has she ever told you what happened to her in that house? No, other people have. Well, right now, I'm just talking about the defendant and the conversations you have had with her. She has never told you since the hospital any other details about what happened to her. Is that right? No. Mr. Greg Davis says, no further questions. Mr. Preston Douglas says, I don't have any other questions, Your Honor. And then the court says, you may step down, ma'am. And at this point in the trial, it's actually the end of a day. So he tells the jury that they can go ahead and leave. They'll adjourn until 9 o'clock the following morning. And then he gives them their typical instructions about, what not to listen to or to talk about, etc. But the attorneys and everybody else remain in the courtroom because there's some things that they have to go over. And this is what happens. The court says, let the record reflect these proceedings are being held outside of the presence of the jury, and all parties of the trial are present. Mr. Mosty? Mr. Mosty, again of the defense team, says, the exhibit is number 70, which was identified earlier for the record purposes, as FBI agent Brantley notes that he identified from his file. And the court says, for the record purposes. Mr. Mosty says, it includes all of the notes he had, except for the photographs, which we have not copied. And the court says, any objection to the records? Mr. Shook says, no objection. And the court says, all right, defendant's exhibit 70 is admitted into the record. And then the court says, all right, can I see the young lady up here and that gentleman on the record? All right, come on up here. Okay, we're already on the record now. Your name, ma'am, is, the witness says, Peggy Rogers. And your name? The witness says Sandy Aitken, Aitken. And the court says, all right, ma'am. And your name? And the witness says Pamela King, King. Your name? Ted King, King. And your name? Luann Brown. The court says, are any of you planning on being a witness? The witnesses, they say, no. And the court says, all right. Ladies, please do not communicate with those who will testify, anyone who is going to testify. Is that clear? The witnesses say, yes, sir. The court says, okay, thank you. That's all. See everybody in the morning at 9 o'clock. However, we are going to just continue on with the next witness. And the next witness to take the stand is Julie Clark. And the direct examination is done by the defense, Mr. Curtis Glover. Julie, where do you live? I live in Rockwall, Texas. Okay. For the folks here in Kerrville, that is just an adjoining county to Dallas, isn't it? Yes, it is. Close to Rowlett? Very close. Okay. What do you do up there? What kind of work do you do? I'm a farm manager. Okay. What does that entail? Breeding manager for Arabian horses and German Shepherd dogs. Okay. And you also have an animal collection, don't you? Yes, I do. What might that be? We have several exotic cats. We have a nonprofit organization, Tears, for abandoned exotic animals. Right now, we have 3 Bengal tigers and 2 mountain lions. You have raised some of those by hand, haven't you? Yes, we have. All right. Are you married, Julie? Yes, I am. You have any kiddos? 1 daughter. Okay. How old is she? She is 4. How do you know Darlie Routier? My husband Steve met Darren through work, and soon after my daughter was born, we were invited to a Christmas party, and we met them there and have been friends ever since. About how many years ago would that have been? About 4 years. Okay. At some point in time, you and your family had an occasion to live with the Routiers. What occasioned that? We were going to have a new home built, and we were living with my mother and her husband, but we basically had a disagreement, and we didn't have anywhere else to go at the time, so Darlie invited us to live with them for about a month and a half. Okay. Did you and Darlie become good friends? Very good friends. Okay. You shared a particular interest. What was that? A love of animals. Okay. Explain that to the jury, if you will, what that means. Well, did Darlie have animals? Darlie had several animals, several cats, and 1 dog. Okay. And you loved animals. Mm-hmm. That was kind of a mutual interest between the two of you? Yes. Did y'all pal around together? Yes, we did. Okay. What would that amount to? We had dinner together, usually at least once a week, sometimes through the week. Sometimes we spent the night over. The kids played very well. We went camping together. We went on vacations together. We went shopping together. Did you have an occasion to see her around her children? All the time. Describe that relationship if you would. Darlie had a real good relationship with the boys. I had Courtney when I was young, and I didn't do really well. She helped me a tremendous amount. She was very patient with them, and a lot of times I wasn't. And she helped me learn to be just patient with Courtney. And she just had a very loving relationship with them. Okay. Did you have an occasion at one point in time to work in their shop there? Test neck? A test neck? Yes, sir. Okay. What would you do there? Test technician, building fixtures to test circuit boards, testing circuit boards, QCing circuit boards, everything the job entailed. Okay. How long did you work there? About 10 months. Was there a woman working there by the name of Barbara Jovel? Yes, there was. Okay. She has described Darlie as being a selfish, materialistic. Mr. Greg Davis then says, I'm going to object to that comparison of the testimony, Your Honor. The court says the court will sustain the objection. Mr. Glover then continues. Is Darlie a selfish, self centered, materialistic person in your view? No, absolutely not. Do any of those adjectives apply to her at all? No. You, I guess, had an occasion in June of 1996 to learn of the tragedy. Yes, I did. Tell the jury about that. As far as how I learned of it? Yes. Well, apparently, Darren didn't have our home number in his wallet, but he had my husband's beeper number. Darlie's sister beeped us about 5:30 in the morning, and we called back, and of course, Dana told us what happened. Mr. Greg Davis says, I'm going to object to whatever Dana told her as being hearsay. The court says, ma'am, here is the thing. Don't say what other people told you, all right? The witness says, okay. And the court says, just listen to the question, but don't get into things like that, okay? The witness says, okay. The court says, you may want to rephrase your question. Mr. Glover says, I will. He then continues, Julie, as a result of what you learned about those events with the boys, tell the jury what you did. Well, I think I was in a tremendous amount of shock at first. I got up and I went through a full range of emotions. I didn't know whether to tell Courtney or. She then says, I'm sorry. The court says, that's all right. Take your time. Anyhow, I got up and I went to the hospital. And Mr. Glover asks, okay, did you see Darlie there? Mm-hmm. Describe her for the jury, if you would. Well, she was still seemed somewhat incoherent, but I went in and talked to her, and did she seem to understand what had happened? Seemed like. Pardon? Seemed like. She was upset and crying and didn't understand how someone could do that to Devin and Damon. Okay. Did you have occasion, and you saw her there, of course, in the hospital shortly after that, I guess? Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you have an occasion, Julie, to go to what has been referred to as the viewing of the boys there at the funeral home? Yes, I did. Okay. Did you see Darlie there? Yes. Okay. Describe her emotions there, if you would. She seemed up and down. She was trying to be strong, but when I got up there, we just hugged each other and started crying. Okay. You are how old, Julie? I'm 23. Okay. You have had occasion, I guess, to grieve in the past? Yes, I have. Was Darlie grieving? I believe so. Any doubt in your mind about that? No doubt. Okay. Did you have an occasion then, I guess, to go to the funeral? Yes, I did. Okay. And after the funeral, did you have occasion then to go to any of the events that occurred thereafter? I believe there was a prayer service at the graveside. Did you have occasion to go to that? Yes, I'm sorry, when? Right after the funeral? It was on the 14th, I think, of June? Oh, yes, no. I didn't go to the prayer. I went to the birthday party following the prayer service because I couldn't get off work. Okay. Did you know what the birthday party was to be? Yeah, mainly for the neighborhood children. And I brought Courtney, and Devin made a huge deal out of turning 7 for so long. And we were invited to the birthday party. So we decided to go ahead and take Courtney to that. Okay. Did you see anything inappropriate about that? No. Mainly, I was talking to other people and, singing birthday songs and trying to be uplifting to the children. Okay. There were little mementos left around on the grave, weren't there? Balloons and that sort of thing? Yes. Did you find that to be okay? Yeah. Okay. Mr. Glover then says, we'll pass the witness, and the cross examination is done by Mr. Greg Davis. Miss Clark, my name is Greg Davis. I just have a few questions for you. If you need to take a break at any time while I'm talking with you, let me know. Okay? Okay. Miss Clark, would you agree with me that the defendant is an intelligent woman? Yes. Okay. In fact, would it be fair to say, since her husband was out working, that she basically ran that house over there on Eagle Drive, didn't she? Basically. Okay. And she also helped with the books up there at Testneck, correct? Yes. In fact, she had worked up there. Hadn't she worked with her husband at what? Kuplex before? I believe so. So clearly an intelligent woman, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. You said that you had taken vacations together with the family. Were you with the family when they went to Las Vegas in 1995? No. Did you go with the family in 1995 to Durango, Colorado? No. How about the trip in 1995 to Grand Cayman Island in the Caribbean? No. You stated that you didn't feel the defendant was materialistic or selfish. Would it be fair to say, then, that you were familiar with her financial situation, her family's finances? Not as much as to know how they may have kept their checkbook or anything like that, but as far as, shopping and that things of that nature. Okay. Certainly familiar with what she bought and things that she liked to acquire. Mhm. Would it be fair to say that Darlie Routier, she loved nice things, didn't she? She loved for her family to have nice things. Okay. Well, the 28-foot boat out there on the lake, that was a pretty nice boat, wasn't it? That they had on Lake Ray Hubbard? Yeah, that was Darren's boat. The spa in the backyard, that was a new, very nice spa, wasn't it? Yes. And having been inside the house, you certainly know that it was furnished very nicely, wasn't it? Yes, it was. Now, and you were very close and are still a very close friend with the defendant, aren't you? Yes, I am. Okay. Since this occurrence, you visited with her several times, have you not? Yes, I have. Do you have any idea of the number of times that you have gone to the jail, either in Dallas County or here in Kerr County, to visit with the defendant? I don't have any idea. I mean, to add them up, probably maybe 20. And as a very close friend, wouldn't it also be fair to say that you were pretty familiar with her emotional state over the time period that you knew her? You knew when she was up, and you also knew when she might be down. Is that right? Yes. And she certainly had up times, didn't she? Yes, she did. And wouldn't it also be fair to say that, like all of us, she also had times when she got down? Yes, she did. And in 1996, wouldn't it be fair to say that after Drake was born, before the murders occurred in June, that there were several times that Darlie had down periods during that period? There were, but there were several times that she had up periods. Okay. But again, my question to you was, you certainly would have to agree with me that during that time period, you saw down periods also, didn't you? I did. Darlie was unhappy with the way she looked, wasn't she? I think she was on a diet. We never really talked about it with each other as far as being concerned about our weight because I really didn't care that much about mine. Would it be fair to say that Darlie took a great deal of pride in the way she looked, her appearance? I think most women do. Okay. And she had certainly gained weight since the birth of Drake. If she had, it wasn't a whole lot, only because she could still fit into her jeans that she wore before she had him. So, were you aware that shortly before this that Darlie had started to take diet pills to try to lose that weight? Yes. And wouldn't it also be true that taking care of two boys, Devin and Damon, and a new baby, wouldn't it be true that also put a pretty good amount of pressure on this woman? Well, when Courtney was 7 months old, I also babysat Devin and Damon for a period of about 3 months. And the boys were very good children, very easy to take care of, very clean. Okay. Darlie, she really liked a very clean house, didn't she? Yeah, she liked it to be straight and nice. Matter of fact, anybody that went in the house, including the kids, had to take their shoes off, didn't they? No, they didn't. My husband didn't take his shoes off. Okay. I generally tried to, but if I didn't, it's not like Darlie would gripe at us and say, go back to the door and take your shoes off or anything. Well, it wouldn't be uncommon, though, when you went over there to see the kids' shoes out on the front porch or on the back porch, would it? Oh, yeah. I have a brand new house and I try to make my child take off her shoes also. And having a child, as some of us do, kids are not always the neatest in the world, are they? No, they're not. They like to play and sometimes they mess up stuff in the house, don't they? Yes, they do. And I want to direct your attention to the early part of May of 1995. Okay. The first week in May. Were you still in very close contact with the defendant at that time? Mm-hmm. How would you describe? And the court says, ma'am, please say yes or no. And the witness says, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yes. Mr. Davis continues. Okay. If you will do that for the benefit of the court reporter. Yes. Okay. During that first week in May, how would you describe the defendant's emotional state? She was depressed. Soon after she had her period and everything, soon after that, she got a lot better and seemed a lot happier. Okay. When you say she was depressed, what do you mean by that? How did you know that she was depressed? Well, just being around her, I knew how she reacts to certain things, and she just wasn't quite as happy as she had been, but certainly had recovered. Would it be fair to say that she doesn't deal with stress real well? That one of the things that she doesn't react well to is stress? I think she deals with stress very well. If, for instance, well, would you be surprised then that upon the entry into the hospital at Baylor, that was one of the questions asked, and the response was not good in reaction to stress? That would surprise you, I guess, wouldn't it? Well, it depends on the amount of stress. Normal, everyday bookkeeping type of stress, I think she deals with very well. With her children being murdered, I don't think she would deal with that all that well. Well, are you aware of the journal that she was keeping? I was aware of an entry, but only through the media. You have received several letters from Darlie over the years, have you not? Over the past 6 months, yes. Since she's been in jail, yes. You certainly would recognize her handwriting, wouldn't you? Yes, I would. Okay. Miss Clark, if you will, I'm going to ask you to look at a portion of State's Exhibit 90 that I have paper clipped this. If you would, please look at the pages that I have paper clipped and tell me whether or not you recognize that to be the writing of Darlie Routier. Mr. Mulder says, Judge, what is the purpose of this? If he is trying to offer this into evidence, if he will just let us know, we can make it easy on him. Mr. Davis says, well, I'll offer it at this time. And Mr. Mulder says, we have no objection. Mr. Davis says, good. The court says, all right, State's Exhibit 90 is admitted. Miss Clark, let me turn back first to the front portion of the book. And does it appear to say this book belongs to Darlie Routier, born January 4th, 1970? Yes, it appears that way. And as we look towards the last entry there, do we see that it's dated May 3rd, 1996? Yes, okay. It appears to be addressed to Devin, Damon, and Drake, and it appears to be her writing. Is that right? Yes. Mr. Davis says, Your Honor, if I could publish this at this time, the court says you may. Mr. Davis says, ladies and gentlemen, this is dated 5/3/96. Devin, Damon, Mr. Mulder says, excuse me, Judge, under the rule of completeness, we would like to have him read the entire journal. Mr. Davis says, I'm offering the entire journal. I simply wish to publish this portion first. And the court says, well, just read that portion of it. It's all in evidence. Go ahead, please. Mr. Davis says, thank you. And then continues with his questioning, quote, I hope that one day you will forgive me for what I am about to do. My life has been such a hard fight for a long time, and I just cannot find the strength to keep fighting anymore. I love you three more than anything else in this world, and I want all three of you to be healthy and happy. I don't want you to see a miserable person every time you look at me. Your dad loves you all very much, and I know in my heart he will take care of my babies. Please do not hate me or think in any way that this is your fault. It's just that and Miss Clark, have I now stopped where the writing stopped in the book? Yes. At or near the time that that entry is dated, Miss Clark, did you discuss with Darlie the types of problems that led her to make that sort of entry in this journal? No, I didn't. Miss Clark, I know you have a family, as we all do. Would it be fair to say that even with the best of friends, there are some things that maybe you don't share with friends that you keep within your own home or your own family? I'm sure there are. Miss Clark, I want to move forward to when you were with the defendant in the hospital. You said that she appeared to be incoherent, but she seemed to understand what had happened. Is that right? Yeah. Did she tell you what had happened to her and the two boys that morning? She told me a little bit of what she thought happened. All right. Could you please relate to us what the defendant told you there in the hospital? She just had said they had fallen asleep downstairs in what we call the Roman room. I guess they call it the living room. I'm not sure, which we do quite often. She said that she was somewhat waken up, but Damon had come over and nudged her, and that really kind of brought her to, and she felt someone down maybe by her legs. I don't know whether she had said, I can't remember what she said, whether he was touching her or what. But she got up and the guy had gone through the kitchen and she followed him that way. He went out through the laundry room into the garage, and she had followed him to the laundry room and found the knife on the laundry room floor, came back and turned the light on in the kitchen. And that is when she, as far as I can remember, that's when she noticed she was cut and then looked over and saw Devin laying on the floor and Damon was there. All right. I was trying to take this down as you were talking. Let me see if I've got it. Okay. Okay. She said she had fallen asleep down in the Roman room that night, correct? Right? Did she tell you where she was sleeping in the Roman room? Well, I don't recall if she told me, but she always sleeps on the long green couch. So I assumed that is where she was sleeping. Okay. Would that be the one over close to the windows that face the backyard? Yes. Okay. And are you familiar with the cat cage that is over by the big screen TV? I think the last time I was in there, it was over by the windows. All right. So she is asleep, and then Damon nudges her, and that is when she really comes awake. Is that right? Mm-hmm. The court says, is that a yes, ma'am? She then says, yes, I'm sorry. The court says, all right. That is good. Mr. Davis then continues, all right. She looks up, and there is a man down by her legs. Is that correct? Right. And what I can't recall whether she said if he was touching her or anything like that. I just recall her saying that she saw the back of him and he went towards the kitchen and out through the laundry room. Okay. So saw the back of him. Did she describe him doing anything up here around her neck with a knife or any other instrument? I don't remember. Okay. So saw the man by her legs, saw his back. He then got up and went through the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And she started to follow after him. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Did she describe how this man was leaving? Was he just walking, running? What was he doing? I don't remember her saying whether anyone was walking or running. Okay. I would assume he was running. Okay. So you assume the man is running through the kitchen. She is chasing him, correct? Or following him? Following him. Following him. And then she gets to the laundry room. Would it be fair utility room where the washing machine and dryer are? Right, right. Okay. And it's inside the utility or the laundry room on the floor is where she sees the knife, right? I believe so. Okay. That is certainly the way that you remember her describing it, right? That's how I remember it. Okay. Not in the kitchen, not in the family room, the laundry room floor, correct? Right. And did she pick the knife up at some point? Yes. All right. Was that before or after she went back into the kitchen and turned the light on? That I'm not sure about. I don't know if she turned the light on and then actually went back and looked, or if she picked it up and carried it over and then turned the light on. All right. So at some point, then she turned the light on in the kitchen and then went back into the family room or the Roman room. Yeah. She didn't really tell me much past. She said that Damon was there, and I believe she said she asked him to lay down, and I really don't know whether she went to get Darren, but she said she got some towels and wet them and put them on Damon's back. Okay, so she actually told you that she had to tell Damon to lay down. Is that right? Well, or she told him to lay down? Well, actually, that part I'm not sure about. I don't know if he laid down or if she went over and told him or what. I don't know how that happened. I know that he laid down. She said he laid down and she went and got some towels and wet them and put them on his back and then actually placed them on his back, right? I would assume so. And then what is the next thing that she said that she did? Well, we pretty much didn't talk about anything else after that. All right. And what sort of description of this man did she give you? She just said she thought she didn't say he was huge or anything. She said she thought he was somewhat built, maybe had a t shirt and a ball cap on. She just said she saw the back of him. Okay. White or black? At that time, she said she really wasn't sure, possibly white. Hair, long, short? I believe she said medium length hair. Okay. What do you understand to be medium length? Is mine medium? No, yours is short. Okay. Maybe past the collar? Okay. A little bit past the shirt collar then? Yes. Maybe a little bit longer? Okay. We have a ball cap, t-shirt. How about socks? Anything in his hands, gloves that he was wearing? She didn't say, but I would think she just described the back of him. If he was moving, I don't know if she could have seen anything in his hands, but didn't describe anything for you, though. She didn't. And what did she say that this man said to her? I don't recall her saying anything that went on verbally either way. All right. So your recollection is today that there was no discussion about what the man said to her or what she may have said to him. As far as you know, there was nothing, right? As far as I know, I don't know what went on. Certainly, what you know about the event is what the defendant has told you, since you weren't there. Is that right? Right. And that evening, June 5th, the night leading up to this, had you been over at the Routiers that night? No, we were going to go because it was my birthday the day before, but I had a bunch going on and canceled. Okay. In your 20 other visits with the defendant since she has been in jail, what other information has she given you? Has she been able to give you a better description of what happened to her that night? Not that I can, she just, that's all she ever told me. As far as the man or anything, it's always been that's all she could remember. Okay. Have you all discussed it when you have gone to the jail to visit with her? Not much because I try not to talk about that. I try to rather tell her about the good stories that we have had with my daughter and try to lift her up emotionally. Mr. Davis says, I'll pass the witness, Your Honor, and the redirect is begun by Mr. Curtis Glover. Needless to say, Julie, I guess a good description of how she could describe what went on there that night was both difficult as well as fuzzy. Mr. Davis says, I'm going to object to that as being leading. The court says, you may want to rephrase your question. Go ahead. Mr. Glover says, stated facts with reference to whether or not it seemed fuzzy to her or difficult. Yeah. Okay. And now there has been some discussion about the fact that Darlie suffered from the blues after Drake was born. Is that a good description of it? Blues? Yes. Is that a postpartum type thing? I believe so. Women understand that, I guess, among themselves better than perhaps men do? Yes. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes, I do. Would you describe what Darlie was going through as perhaps being that? As far as emotionally, how she seemed to me? Right. She had good days as well as bad. I know that she hadn't been having her menstrual period, Did you all talk about that? Yes. Okay. Well, was that of some concern? Medically or physically or mentally? Just y'all talking about it. Well, it didn't seem abnormal because she breastfed Drake. And according to the doctors, you don't have menstrual cycles during that period. Okay. Did she ultimately then have a menstrual cycle? Yes, she did. Was that such that it became a topic of conversation? Yes, it did. What did it do as far as uplifting her? It made a tremendous difference in her. I don't want to be rude or anything as far as her drive and things of that nature. It made a turnaround for her. Okay. And y'all talked about it? Yes. Okay. And did she seem somewhat relieved emotionally that things were back to normal? Yes, she did. Okay. Was her situation there remarkable as far as her attitude and whatnot? As far as being overly happy or sad or whatever? No, she seemed pretty much back to normal. Okay. Well, before that even occurred, were you concerned? Before that occurred, I mean, we had dinner with them usually at least once a week, and we talked about our problems and we talked about the good times that we had had that week. And it didn't seem so for me to be very, all that much concerned about it. Okay. I mean, yeah, I don't like it when my friends are not happy, but usually by the time we left, we were happy and having a good time. Okay. Needless to say, did her appearance become bedraggled like that of a person who is down and out? No, Darlie always looked nice. Okay. Was her house well kept? Yes. Did she have the normal concerns that you had always observed in her? Yes. Mr. Glover says, pass the witness, and there is a recross by, again, Mr. Greg Davis. Just one other question, Miss Clark. Had you ever seen her deal with her mortgage being in default before? I never knew of her mortgage being in default. Mr. Greg Davis says, no further questions. And with that, that ends the testimony of these three witnesses. All right, so let's recap what we've learned today. First up, we had Dana Godfrey. Darlie and Dana had known each other for 8 years. They had become close friends, and they had first met when Darlie moved into her home on Bond Street. And this is before she lived on Eagle Drive. She mentioned how they spent a lot of time together and how nice and kind Darlie was. We do find out that it was a neighbor of Darlie's that called Dana, and this neighbor was Celia Morgan, to tell Dana what was happening. But we didn't get to hear what was said because the prosecution objected to it as hearsay. Dana arrived at the hospital and said that Darren was explaining to them what had happened, but didn't go into any details. She then made it up to Darlie's room and found Darlie on the bed crying with the picture of the boys. She referred to Darlie as looking like she was under medication and listless. This was around 9 to 9:30 in the morning. And at this point, Dana said that Darlie tried to tell her what happened, but Mr. Davis of the prosecution objected, saying this was hearsay. She mentions also noticing there was dried blood in between Darlie's fingers. There were some on her fingernails and there was some on her arm. And she further mentions that when she went to the viewing of the boys, that Darlie seemed out of it and not quite with it. When the prosecution questioned her about whether or not she had mentioned to a nurse about this dried blood that was on Darlie, she said she didn't report it, but we learn that there was a nurse in the room with Darlie right next to her. Dana did mention to this nurse that Darlie probably needed something to sleep. And the nurse told her that, well, she'd been like that for a while and then went to go get Darlie something so that she could sleep. Personally, this makes me feel like the staff was seriously doing a half-assed job of caring for their patient. Why did she still have dried blood on her? Why did it take another person to mention that Darlie needed to sleep to finally get someone to do something? Did the nurses already believe that Darlie was at fault and so weren't as attentive to her as they could have been? This is just my personal opinion, by the way. It just seems so passive and so unethical. Mr. Davis then brings up the fact that of about Darlie possibly trying to unalive herself, which is something not in evidence and which was objected to. Now, this is not the first time that the prosecution has brought this up. I think, if I remember right, this was brought up as well with the first two witnesses. This was also objected to at that point, and at that point, it was sustained. But this time, the judge allowed for the question. So that didn't make any sense to me. The second witness that we had in this episode was Cara Byford. She goes by Jeannie, and she had met Darlie through Darlie's mom, Darlie Key, in 1989. So she too has known Darlie for about 8 years. She described Darlie as kind hearted and one of the nicest people she has met who would do anything for you. She was happy, she was generous. We also learned that Cara had also lost a child, and that when this whole thing happened with Darlie, Darlie reached out to Cara for help. Cara is asked if she ever saw the bruise on Darlie's arm, and she said that she did, and that it was significant. Cara was in the hospital visiting Darlie on both the 6th and the 7th. She was so upset, she said, by what she saw that she actually had to leave the room. Now, after this, there was actually a bit of kind of humorous commentary by the defense, where Mr. Preston had said that he had suspicion that the prosecution was going to ask her if she ever went to a nurse about the bruise. And this, of course, gets objected to and sustained, so he has to rephrase the question. Cara was also at the service for the boys, as well as at the gravesite where they had the birthday party. She gave Darlie a poem that had been given to her after her child had passed away. And this poem was objected to by Mr. Davis, but it was still allowed to be admitted. Now, I'm sure that Mr. Davis didn't want any kind of sympathy at all to be shown towards Darlie whatsoever. So he did whatever he could to stop this poem from being read. It was read, however, and if you listened to the entire episode, you'll know how heartbreaking the poem was, considering the circumstances. The prosecution then asks about the bruises on Darlie's arm, and Cara describes them as being very dark purple. Now, a blue or purple bruise can come from the injury happening anywhere from 1 to 5 days after the injury. At about 5 to 7 days, it turns greenish, and then at 7 to 10 days, more of a yellow. She is then asked to show on Davis's own arm where this bruising extended. And in court, she indicated just above the wrist, all the way to just above the elbow. But she also mentioned that it is from what she can remember. The defense objects to this, saying that Mr. Davis, when he talked about this, misstated how far above the elbow that she indicated, and wants the record to reflect that she actually indicated only about an inch above the elbow and not just simply, quote, above the elbow, as Davis mentioned it. She is a little more descriptive about when she saw this bruise, and she said that it was on the 7th, about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So this was well over 24 hours after the crime. Davis then asks her about what Darlie said to her. And then the little weasel that he is, sorry, my opinion only, but he's definitely being a smartass here, said, "What version did she give you?" Cara mentions that even after Darlie was released from the hospital, she had met with her about 15 times, and at no time did she ever talk about the crime. I can't speak for her, but I'm guessing that she was just waiting for Darlie to talk about it herself when she was ready, and that she didn't want to approach the subject until Darlie was comfortable enough to do so. So after the jury leaves for the day, an exhibit is admitted. These were the documents that were copied from the FBI agent Brantley's notes. And then the judge calls up some people who were still in the courtroom. Now, in total, there were 5 people that were called up: Peggy Rogers, Sandy Aitken, Pam and Ted King, and Luann Brown. The judge asked if any of them were going to be witnesses, and they all said no. They were then told not to communicate with anyone who was going to testify. They agreed, and that was it for the day. Now, I do want to make a point that Sandy Aiken happened to be an aunt to Darlie, and she was in the courtroom constantly taking notes during the trial. And I will have a short special report, special episode on Sandy at the end of the trial because it's interesting. The next witness in line for the defense is Julie Clark. Now, Julie and Darlie, they've been friends for about 4 years and they bonded over their love of animals. At one point in time, Julie was having a house built, and Darlie invited her and her family to stay with them for about a month and a half until their house was finished. Julie talked about how when she was a new mom, she wasn't sure what to do. And Darlie was the one who helped her to develop her patience with her daughter. She also worked for a time with Darren and Darlie at Testneck. It was actually Darlie's sister, Dina, who had paged Julie's husband around 5:30 in the morning to let them know what had happened. Julie, too, attended the birthday party at the gravesite and even brought her daughter with her. Kids had already been invited to the birthday party, and so what they did is they decided to just go ahead with the party. Julie felt it was perfectly fine. When Mr. Davis of the prosecution takes over, he starts talking about how Julie had said that she went on vacations with Darlie. And then he begins to rattle off places that Darlie had been in 1995: Las Vegas, Grand Cayman Island in the Caribbean. Aside from making it apparent to the jury that Darlie traveled a lot in 1995, he's also making Julie feel like shit, that she wasn't on any of these trips with Darlie, I'm sure. Davis then mentions the boat and how the boat was so nice, wasn't it? But Julie didn't take the bait and told him that this boat was actually Darren's. He then mentions the spa in the backyard. Clearly, he's trying to make it out that Darlie is very materialistic. He also tries to take very normal things, such as people being up and down at any given time or someone concerned about their weight, and that Darlie cared about her appearance, as things that should be looked down on, even though it's something that happens every day all across the world. He also tried to make it an issue that she had the kids take off their shoes before coming into the house. I mean, seriously, he thinks this makes someone overly concerned about her house or her things. He then tries to get Julie to say that Darlie didn't deal with stress very well because she was down after Drake was born. But it sounds like she may have been concerned that maybe she was pregnant again. And when she discovered that she wasn't, it was a relief. He then talks about how when Darlie went into the hospital, something was reported or said about how stressed she was. And Julie made a great point about there were different kinds of stress, and having your kids get murdered would definitely be stressful. I seriously just wanted to yell, "Go, Julie." Davis then pulls out Darlie's journal and he takes one page out of it, which happens to be a page where she talks about how she wants her children, all of them, to forgive her and that their dad loves them very much. And the journal entry just kind of stops. Now, here's the thing. As much as Davis wants to make this one single journal entry out to be the entirety of Darlie, it doesn't take into account the entire thing, which he said he entered into evidence, but he only read this one piece. Also, to me, this section doesn't seem to me as if it's a mom who doesn't like her children. Instead, it seems to me as if in that moment, Darlie was very sad and was just journaling her feelings that day. Nothing in that points, at least to me, towards the fact that she wants to hurt her children. Davis has her recount what Darlie told her about what happened that night. And in this testimony, there are a lot of assumptions and things that Julie thought she remembered, but she wasn't sure. We hear again about the man, about his size, that he had a black t-shirt on and a ball cap, and that his hair was just below the collar. When Davis does his recross, he asks Julie if she knew that their mortgage, the Routier's mortgage, was in default. And she said that she didn't. Now, again, stating something that not only makes Darren and Darlie look bad, but at the same time letting Julie know that he knows something about Darlie that even she doesn't know, as much of a good friend as she said that she was. And I am not going to lie, this guy makes my skin crawl. And that'll do it for this episode. In the next episode, we'll hear from Luann Black, who is Darlie's aunt, and Karen Neal, Darlie's friend from across the street, who, if you remember, was at the crime scene the morning of the 6th after Darren ran over to the Neal's house. Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. If you liked today's episode, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment on our YouTube podcast page. And don't forget to subscribe as well, so you don't miss out on our future episodes. You can find the link to our page and other important links in the show notes below. We will talk very soon. Bye for now.